Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that today's session, Inside the Buyers and Contracting Authority's Mind, How Federal Procurement Works, is a full one for us. We're still going to be letting people into the room for the next few minutes, but I just wanted to say hi and let everybody know that this is going to be recorded and you're going to receive a recording tomorrow. So no need to take a ton of notes if you don't want to. Yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Kathy Burrell and I work in client services for WeBC. So if you call us or send us an email, you'll either speak with me or Selena is our newest person in client services. So welcome everybody. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're gathered today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Okanagan Syilx people. We recognize, honor, and respect the presence of Indigenous people, past, present, and future. So that's, if you are curious to find out, we have people joining us from all over the country. If you are not sure what traditional territory you're on, Jen is going to pop it into the chat, a little map where you can check. Or if you want to just say your first name and which territory you're on, we'd love you to do that. I'm an entrepreneur in residence here at WeBC. And basically, we're also going to be asking you, if possible, we're going to try and end right at 11 o'clock. If you could fill out our feedback poll at the end. We don't want to offer you webinars here at WeBC that you're not interested in, and clearly this one is of great interest to a lot of people. But if you have an idea or something that you would like us to do a webinar on, please stick around till maybe 1 or 2 minutes after 11 and fill out our feedback poll. We would really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we offer here at WeBC. We provide support for your small business journey. We offer financing to get your businesses started and operating capital to fuel your growth. We offer more flexibility than traditional lenders because we take a holistic approach and provide loans based on your business's viability, not just based on a formula. So what this means is we provide loans to a diverse range of women-owned businesses and support you with integrated services, including complimentary training, mentoring, and business advising. So just to be clear, if you were to apply for a loan with WeBC and you were approved for that loan, the term of the loan is usually 5 years. And for those 5 years, you could access complimentary, free business advising and mentoring as part of your loan with WeBC. From essential business skills development to personalized business advice, we know the right questions to ask and the right resources to connect you with. In our mentoring programs, you can connect with a network of women entrepreneurs and experts all around BC. We serve the entire province from the top to the bottom to the sides, who can provide and inspire you. You can learn about our services at our website, which is we-bc.ca. And I just wanted to tell people as well that we're having, our website is oversubscribed and we're a little slow with our website. So please be patient. And if you have a question you need answered right away, please contact us via our website or phone us. And that information will be in the chat. We'd also love you to sign up for our e-blast newsletter to get notified of any programs, as we have tons of great offerings coming up. And of course, next week we have part 3 of this procurement session. All right. So today's webinar. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Sarah Ann Hersenko. I almost did Sarah Ann is with Procurement Assistance Canada. Inside the Buyer and Contract Authority's Mind, How Federal Procurement Works is an interesting topic. It might sound complicated, but it's not really. It's how to sell to the federal government using what they need from you. So ever wonder what the federal government buys and how the process works? This session takes you inside the journey of a federal buyer and a contracting authority, from identifying the need, what does the federal government need, developing the requirements to posting a tender. So once they determine their need, they go on and post specifics. And you'll learn who the key players are, how procurement methods are selected, and how requirements are shaped. And that's really important to know how they're thinking so that you can proceed the way that you need to. Led by Sarah Ann Hersenko of Procurement Assistance Canada, this session is designed to help suppliers, and you would be a supplier, anybody on this session, understand how solicitations are developed and how to make the most of the question period today. We're going to try and leave about 10 minutes for questions, but if anybody would like to ask a question, they could raise their hand or they could type it into the chat, and we will do our best to answer questions as we go along. We'd like to welcome Sarah Ann.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. And hello, everybody. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, there we go. And is everybody able to see what's up on the shared screen okay?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And if at any point something's not clear, please just let me know. I want to say thanks, WBC, for inviting me and Procurement Assistance Canada to your sessions. I always really look forward to taking part in these sessions with you. So as Kathy said, my name is Sarah Ann, and I work, live, and play on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and I'm very grateful for these Indigenous caretakers of this land. And again, like, feel free to type in the chat, raise your hand, and unmute yourself. I'm not going to be able to see the chat while I'm presenting, so Kathy, or if you could keep an eye on things and just let me know if there's a question in the chat. But please feel free to participate. I like this to be interactive as possible. And if anything at the end of the presentation maybe isn't clear, you'd like further support, or you know, if you just want one-on-one, more tailored support, you can reach out to myself or my colleague Barry. So we'll get into it. You'll see a couple of windows pulled up. And on the one window is the Canada Buys platform or website. And I'm wondering if any of you are familiar with this website or if you've had a chance to explore it. Canada Buys is the website that the federal government uses to post all of their bid solicitations. They also post events, trainings, anything kind of procurement related on this website. So maybe if I could get you to raise your hand if you have had a chance to explore Canada Buys, if you're familiar with it at all. Just nice to get a sense of what the experience in the room is. And before I go any further, thanks for the hand raises. You'll notice, I want to point out that you'll notice on the end column where it says organization. Oftentimes you'll see federal government departments listed here. For example, D&D, Department of National Defense, Department of Agriculture and Agricultural Food, Department of National Defense again. But I want to mention that Canada Buys also includes other levels of government and their tender solicitations. So it can get a little bit confusing if you're not aware of that. Federal government but departments do post here, but it's the centralized platform, the centralized government platform. So multiple jurisdictions post here. That includes even municipalities, health authorities, provinces. So it is kind of a nice way for suppliers to get a sense of where the opportunities are, not just in the federal government, but in multiple levels of government. So when you pull up Canada Buys, if you go to open one of these tender documents, you may be taken to a third-party platform, which can confuse people. And again, if you want a more in-depth overview of some of that, please feel free to reach out. We're going to focus on a few other things today, but I do want to give you that heads up that if you're taken to a third-party platform, that's normal and to be expected. The federal government consists of hundreds of departments, and typically each department will have their own procurement team. Public Services and Procurement Canada, or PSPC, is a separate department. It's its own department. It is the procurement arm of the federal government. So while most departments have their own procurement department, or rather procurement team, the PSPC supports all of those procurement teams. And the procurement teams within departments will have their own kind of spending limits, just depending on the delegated financial authority of that department. So it varies department by department. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth later. But the point is that sometimes if the department is not able to spend a certain amount, if it's kind of over that threshold, then it will go to PSPC, and they will kind of manage that particular purchase. And so if you look here on Canada Buys, sometimes you will see that the department is PSPC, and that means that they are purchasing on behalf of a different department. Sometimes it'll be posted by the department itself if it's under that threshold. So you might notice PSPC is one of the departments that is listed in the organization column. And you can find this online, but each department has their own spending limit. So if the procurement is over that limit, then PSPC will take care of that on their behalf. For example, construction. PSPC's spending limit in construction, if it's a competitive process, it's $75 million. For non-competitive, it's 1.25 million dollars. Another department may have a $750,000 spending limit for the competitive process, and typically lower for non-competitive. If, for example, DFO, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, needs to build a new hangar to store their vessels. The hangar is going to cost well over $1 million likely. So in that case, the department will not be able to make that purchase themselves. So they would work with PSPC in order to do so. So departments often will have to work with PSPC in order to purchase the things that they need. And if you want more in-depth information on the delegated authority limits, I posted a link actually after the end of my presentation. I'll share the PowerPoint, and there are a number of links within it. So you can actually go to the different websites that I am referring to. If you go to Appendix A, here you'll see a lot of specifics. There's a ton of information, not worth me kind of going through it all, but if you are interested, you can have a closer look. And you may wonder why I'm sharing this. And the reason is that sometimes you may see a bid solicitation for a particular department, or for PSPC, but the end client is actually a different department. So understanding the different thresholds can help you figure out where to kind of target your networking based on, the contract value that you typically sell. If you're networking with a particular department and you know that what you will be selling to them is over the threshold of what they're actually delegated to spend, you might want to focus more of your efforts on
Sarah
replying to bids
Ann,
through PSPC.
there
Yeah.
is a question from somebody in the session today wondering if they are an American business, are they able to bid on a Canadian contract with the federal government?
Yeah. It would depend on the trade agreement, the applicable trade agreement, and what it actually says within the tender document. So you'd have to look at each tender document and look into the requirements and conditions and any relevant trade agreements. But yeah, it is definitely possible.
Thanks.
Yeah. One example is pro services, which is one of the 6 categories within the professional services, which is a larger category. So pro services, anything up to $100,000 must go to a Canadian supplier, anything up to 100,000. But because we have a trade agreement with Korea, if it's over $100,000, then Korean businesses are also able to compete. So if it's under the threshold, it's limited to Canadian. If over, then Korean businesses are also allowed to compete because of that trade agreement. So it would depend on the trade agreement. Each one has their own threshold. Sometimes, typically anything over that threshold, then businesses from that country where that trade agreement applies are also able to compete. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thanks. And,
And
just to remind everybody too, Sarah Ann has been very generous after this session to say if you have specific questions or you want to have a bit longer of a talk about something specific like an American business, go ahead and take advantage of that and send her an email. And we'll be sharing Sarah Ann's information at the end of this session.
perfect. Yeah, thank you. So the procurement process itself includes 3 key stakeholders. So the contracting authority. So they are responsible for deciding which of the processes is most appropriate for the particular requirement, what types of requirements are involved, how evaluation will be decided, and they support buyers. And buyers are, also sometimes called the project management authority. It really depends on the name of on the department. There are a number of different names. Sometimes they're called project authority, sometimes they're called client, sometimes they're called sponsor, sometimes they'll be called a technical authority, but they're all the buyer essentially, and they are responsible for developing a statement of work. So essentially when a buyer realizes that a department needs something, so maybe they need to hire a project manager to run a large project that's upcoming, or maybe they need to hire a consultant. They would first have to figure out what exactly they would require from a consultant, what the time frame is, start and end dates, where the work should be completed, who that person would be communicating with, what the scope of the project is. So it's the buyer who would determine all of those things. And then obviously the third stakeholder is all of you, and you would be considered suppliers. So the statement of work is meant for suppliers to understand what the requirements of the particular purchase are. So within the tender document, you will see a lot of different information, including contact information. Let's pull up an example. So here we have a tender document. You can see the contact information under this tab. So you see the name of the person is Shufang Wang. That is the contracting authority. So that is not the buyer. So the buyer is not actually listed because the contracting authority is managing this on behalf of the buyer. So that's the role of the contracting authority. And within the procurement process, there are 4 main phases. So 3 stakeholders, 4 phases. So the first phase is what we'll be focusing on today, and that's the pre-contractual phase. So that is how buyers and the contracting authority work together to figure out what procurement method is going to be the best for this particular procurement. Then the other phases are contract management, contractual, contract management, and post-contractual. And I won't get too far into those ones today, but if you would like more information, feel free to reach out and we can spend some one-on-one time. But today we'll focus mostly on pre-contractual, and I'll go a little bit into the contractual phase as well. So like I mentioned, these are the phases. So the pre-contractual phase is where the department decides what it is they need to buy. So for example, in this this one that I have pulled up, they need to purchase services from a contract manager. So they would, the contracting authority and the buyer would come up with a statement of work. And the contracting authority would figure out which method of supply is going to be the most appropriate. There are a number of different methods, so different solicitation types, and each one kind of has its own purpose. And I'll explain a little bit more about the more common kinds a little bit later. But if you can see what solicitation type is being used, then it'll give you an idea of what you might need to do, what the process will be. If you're unsure of the solicitation type, it can be a little bit disorienting. So it's important, like right off the bat, that you know what the solicitation type is, and because that gives you a lot of information about the expectations and what will happen after contracts are awarded. So the statement of work will typically include the security requirements, if there are any. And the security requirement is not decided by PSBC or by the contracting authority. That is decided by the buyer or the client department. So they determine what types of security requirements are needed. So you reach out to the security, to the contracting authority with any questions, but they're answering questions and managing all of this on behalf of the buyer, who will wind up actually using what it is that you sell. So the client is the one who decides who they want to award a contract to. And depending on the type of solicitation used, sometimes the goal will be to get to establish a list of pre-qualified vendors before they actually need anybody. But you'll be able to read within the document how that's going to be done. There will be instructions within the document. It really varies. Sometimes if they have a list of pre-qualified buyers, they'll start at the top and then they'll move to the second and then go down. Other times, it might be a different approach, So sometimes it'll be random. Sometimes it will be, they'll have a list of 10, and then a couple will be selected based on what the buyer needs. So they may have 12 in total. But again, at the end of the day, it is the client's decision. It's pretty complex. I won't go too far into detail today, but just to give you an overview, the technical evaluation is when the buyer and the contracting authority will decide how bids will be evaluated. Usually that decision is down to the buyer, but they do have to lay that out. So for example, sometimes they may need to hire an engineer, and the contracting authority may not have subject matter expertise in engineering. and maybe the buyer doesn't either. So they would in that case have to hire a subject matter expert, somebody who works in the field, who is able to help them determine how to evaluate any bids that they receive. So again, it's typically up to the buyer to decide, but in order to determine the valuation criteria, they'll often bring in a subject matter expert. And sometimes, as another example, maybe there's a technical solution and it's patented, and the buyer thinks this is the perfect solution to this is exactly what we need. But there's only one supplier who would be able to provide that because it's patented. And the buyer is aware that they're the only provider of that particular type of technology. So in that case, they would be able to come up with a justification for awarding a contract directly to that supplier. They would post at that point, just to ensure that there's no one else who could do that. They would post it's called an ACAN, an advance contract award notice, or ACAN, and that is a process where they say they'll post publicly, hey, this is a solution that we need. We have one supplier. We don't think there's anyone else out there who can provide this. And this is an opportunity for maybe there is a new supplier out there that they're unaware of to respond and to show how they could also meet that criteria. And if there are two or more, then it would need to be a public competitive process. So if they're, yeah. So obviously that wouldn't be a situation with a patent, but if it's a really unique solution maybe, and there's an assumption that there's only one supplier who could fulfill the requirement, they are obligated to post an ACAN just to make sure there's no one else. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, and then in terms of procurement strategies, we have a number of different strategies. And the reason for that is because it's really important that Canada is going about all of this in a fair and transparent manner, providing opportunities for everyone. So there are a number of regulations that the government has set out in order to make sure the procurement process is fair, transparent, and equal. So there is legislation, there's a number of policies that ensure this happens. There are also a number of trade agreements that kind of dictate how and what we are able to procure and from whom. So procurement strategies, I'll be totally honest, none of them are particularly straightforward. The process is pretty long. It's pretty complex. It's not always easy to navigate. The government is now trying to improve some of the language, make it, more simplified language. I won't say that it's been greatly improved yet, but we're on the way, and that's why my office, Procurement Assistance Canada, exists. If anybody needs support or clarification while kind of going through this process, they're welcome to reach out.
Sarah Ann, I do have a question from the chat.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking if there's any way that a supplier, anybody on the session today, could set a notification on this website so that it would notify the potential supplier when a tender becomes available in a certain, area that they're interested in.
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
That is possible.
Okay.
And I can show you how to do that right now.
Okay.
So as an example, you can search for whatever keywords fit your business. And you're able to filter. There are a number of different filter options. So you can filter by category, notice type, or solicitation type, area of service. So once you put in all the filters that you want to put in and the keywords, you hit search, and then where it says follow this search right under filters, it will allow you to choose what type of information, or what type of notification rather, you would like to receive. So you're able to subscribe to notifications for that particular search, and you can do it for more than one.
Great. Yeah, so I just want to remind everybody that, this webinar is being recorded. So if you didn't get that this time, you can go back and look at it again and fiddle around with it, stop it. That's great. And we have another question, Sarah Ann.
Mhm.
Do they list things like wellness and employee retention strategies on this site, or is it just physical products? I guess that would come under pro services, right?
Yeah, it's not just goods. Pro services are 15 different streams within pro services, and each stream has a number of different categories. I'll pull this up. So if you go to this website, you'll see a list of all of the different streams and then the categories within them. And I can be sure to include a link in the email that I send after the
Super.
presentation. So yeah, all types of things: HR, wellness. For example, maybe an HR department just decides they need to bring someone in for employee wellness. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And
So
third
best to just look
question,
and see if anything might be a fit.
great.
Another question, yeah.
Yeah, third question is, and I mean, this one was asked of Barry as well, and I think I'm not sure if this is sort of an urban myth or not, but do you have any data that tells the success rate for the bidding acceptance by newcomers, people that are new to Canada? There's a belief out there that the government will usually go with a long-time supplier even though the bidding price from the newcomer is the cheapest with perhaps better quality. Have you heard that before, Sarah Ann?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I definitely will speak to that a little bit later.
Okay,
Our focus is small and medium-sized enterprises. So here I've got key considerations for buyers listed. Um, and here where it says the third last says small and medium enterprises encourage early engagement and simplify the process. And the federal government actually really wants to support like small and medium diverse businesses in learning how to navigate the federal procurement process. And I will be honest, the process itself is very complex. It's not simple. Um, and so that's why we exist. And our mandate is to support diverse suppliers, underrepresented populations. We're here to provide education, to increase awareness, to encourage and support those small and medium and diverse businesses to work with the federal government. So, we work with a lot of different organizations like WeBC, who support underrepresented populations, just to increase awareness and the chance that, you are awarded a federal government contract. And if any time, a business is having a hard time participating, or they feel like they're not being considered, please reach out to us. We also provide coaching services to support suppliers navigating the complex process. And I will be transparent. It's tough, but it is a goal of the federal government to make this process fair and transparent. To make sure that the evaluation criteria allow for diverse businesses to be awarded contracts, but I think a lot of times the complexity can be a deterrent for smaller organizations, newer organizations, or businesses. Yeah, hopefully that
Thanks,
answers your
Sarah.
questions.
Yeah, that is a good answer. And I mean, I think, we all have to be realistic here as well to think about the idea if this is the first time you've, bid or you've only bid 5 times, like maybe, you shouldn't be expecting to be chosen the first time, maybe just on price, but, you just never know. And Barry is here. Barry, do you want to ask your question or put your 2 cents in? We'd love to hear it.
Oh, hi, Barry.
Barry, you have to unmute yourself.
I know I'm not quick on the fingers like everybody else. I was actually doing some other stuff. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was going to answer. I was trying to follow up on that question about a newcomer to Canada. Um, I've never seen any type of bid that actually asks that question. How long you've been in Canada or anything like that. I come from the professional services world. I had a consulting company for many years. Um, Basically, in the statement of work and in the mandatory criteria, if you meet all the mandatory criteria, it shouldn't matter at all because it's a transparent process. It's going to come down to the points for the technical or whatever they're asking, and in nowhere does it really show or ask, that question. And what it does ask is, your work experience and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind. But something like this, when you see an opportunity, if you feel overwhelmed that you might not, like if you think you have a good chance at it being on, I always recommend collaboration or reaching out to a company that's already in that space or it's one business in that space because they're always typically they're looking for better resources and a better opportunity to win as well. Something to keep in mind is if you're really new to Canada, when you look at the joint venture process on the pro services, you can be brand new to Canada. And I know one of the stipulations is I think you have to be 1 year in business. Only one of the joint venture partners has to be in business 1 year. You both don't have to be. So that could be a way of getting around the process if you're brand new. Okay. But it is a very transparent process. And again, what you do is kind of like I call it like a resume. You're trying to jazz it up as much as you can to get as many points as you can. But again, if you're not in Canada for a year, but you do have that and you want a bit of, I recommend joint venture or collaboration with somebody. And I think in the 3-step process we talked about previously, you can actually on page 3 you can go look for those companies that are already in that supply arrangement.
Great. Thanks, Barry. And,
Okay.
anyone that missed the last session, if you're looking for, the recording, send us an email to EBC and we'll get it to you. So anyway, sorry, Sarah Ann. I think that's good for all the questions. We've got a
No,
couple of comments,
no
but
problem. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate Barry adding those points. Those are great points. And like Barry mentioned about joint ventures or partnerships, that's a great opportunity. If yeah, and if you don't have a lot of industry connections yet, there's an opportunity actually, like if you're a newcomer to Canada, don't have a lot of business connections yet, if you open up the tender, down at the bottom, to show you, you'll see where it says partner with other businesses or partner with another business. You can actually add your company name here and input your information, and then other businesses who are also interested in partnership opportunities can reach out to you. Because, yeah, the process is made to be fair and transparent, right? And that's probably why so much goes into these bid solicitations, why it's such a complex process, why it takes so long. It is really important that small businesses, diverse businesses have an opportunity to compete for and win federal government contracts. I will give you one example of property management. So the federal government has tons of federal buildings that need to be managed, and we contract out property management services to do that. The federal government could easily, contract one company to manage all of the buildings that it owns, but that wouldn't be fair to small and medium-sized businesses. They wouldn't have an opportunity to compete. So it has been broken down by region, by city, so that, certain contractors are able to be awarded a prime contract for a specific area, and then small and medium-sized businesses, or maybe new to the industry businesses, are able to partner, or they were able to subcontract under that prime contractor in order to gain opportunity. So there are a few different ways to go about it. And getting back to my presentation, where was I? Right. So key procurement strategy questions. So things that the buyer and the contracting authority are considering. One thing is the cost. So first of all, they need to determine what the value of that contract might be. That will determine whether or not any trade agreements will apply, as well as which method of supply will be the best fit. Whether or not green procurement requirements will be there for the life cycle of the project, whether there are accessibility requirements, that really needs to be considered. The WCAG 2.0 is a standard for film production, for example, to ensure that any films or videos that are produced are accessible for the life cycle of the procurement. So if something is purchased and distributed, it needs to be, accessible for the entire life cycle. And if it's not at any point, then it can no longer be used. Another piece is the federal government has identified 10 what they call mandatory commodities. As you can see on the slide. So any good or service that falls into one of these categories is considered mandatory, and there are some more restrictions. So for example, Barry used to sell furniture. So he was actually a large supplier to the federal government years ago, and we're really lucky to have him here now because he's such an experienced supplier. But because office furniture is considered a mandatory commodity, if I, at my work, need a new desk, I could either buy direct from a supplier that's on one of these lists, because it's under $25,000 worth of goods, so it would be considered low dollar value, and I would not have to go to a competitive process. But because a desk is considered a mandatory commodity, I'm not able to buy a desk from any supplier out there. I have to look at this mandatory commodity pre-approved supplier list and choose from there. So that's where standing offers and supply arrangements come in. Typically for furniture, it will be a standing offer. And that means it's a list of pre-qualified businesses that I am required to buy my desk from. So, so it's not like I can, people go through a lot of work in order to become qualified vendors. There's a lot of time and effort required into responding to a tender and being awarded that contract as a qualified vendor. So that requires that, we buy from them, right? We can't say, oh, you've put in all this work and now I'm going to go buy from some random furniture store. So that's why there are mandatory commodities that have been identified, and there's a specific procurement process that has to happen when anybody needs to purchase one of them. And so when the buyer, client department, says, I need to buy maybe a lot of furniture, and for example, maybe the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, well, why don't I use the example of the hangar, right? For something over $1 million, they don't have the spending authority to spend over $1 million, so they would then have to bring in PSPC. And together they would figure out what the best strategy for procurement is for that particular item that they need to buy. So there are a number of different things that buyers need to consider: accessibility considerations, trade agreements, Indigenous procurement. In Canada, we have a commitment to the federal government purchasing over 5% of goods and services from Indigenous businesses. We're not there yet. It's an ongoing effort. So whenever there's an effort, whenever there is a possibility, we can sometimes do what is called a set aside. So it would be a tender that is only available for Indigenous businesses to respond to, as long as there are 2 or more Indigenous businesses. An Indigenous participation plan is another way that we encourage industries to consider Indigenous businesses. And it will tell you what the requirements are always in the state of work, and whether it's, you know, Indigenous business only, or whether it's not. There are also green procurement considerations that need to be made. Typically for smaller acquisitions, there are no green procurement requirements, but anything over $2 million, suppliers will have to participate in the Net Zero 2050 challenge in order to be considered for a contract. So this is another commitment that the government has made. Making me an interpreter. Needed a drink of water. And this is in our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint. So just kind of an overview of some of the considerations for buyers. And I'm just looking at the time and realizing I better kind of speed up here. In terms of low dollar value acquisitions, that can be done by a government acquisition card. So it's anything under $25,000 worth of goods or $40,000 worth of services. Those can be purchased directly from a buyer without having to go to a competitive contract, unless that good or service is considered a mandatory commodity. So you want to keep in mind what it is that you provide and whether or not that is a mandatory commodity. If so, I would really suggest looking into standing offers or supply arrangements on Canada Buys, so that you can become a pre-qualified vendor. So standing offers and supply arrangements are very commonly used. They're very similar to each other. So typically, you'll see a posting and it will list a requirement, and it will ask industry or suppliers to respond in order to be added to a qualified supplier list, and then in the future be called up and awarded contracts. So the difference is that a standing offer is at a fixed price, typically for goods, sometimes services. For example, office furniture, a price can be fixed, right? For a desk, a price can be set for a year, and then any desk purchase within that year is at that price. There's an opportunity to increase the price or change the price in following years. With supply arrangements, those are done for things that are, you know, it's not cut and dried. For example, in the AV film production industry, you know, we have a lot of qualified vendors on the list, and they can provide a number of different services, but it's impossible to set a price until you know the scope of work. So a supply arrangement is similar to a standing offer, but it's different in that once the requirements are determined, a solicitation will be sent out to all of the qualified vendors, outlining the scope of the projects and requesting quotes. So then once they receive quotes, they will choose who to actually award the contract to, and that will be based on a combination of lowest price and the technical evaluation results. Mandatory commodities typically are done through these 2 procurement strategies, so supply arrangement, standing offer. So if your product or service is considered a mandatory commodity, well, then that's a great way to narrow down your search. And if you're not sure how to find the right standing offer or supply arrangement that fits what it is you sell, please reach out. I can help you find. I can't help you find them in a one-on-one session. There are so many, but I'm happy to help you narrow it down. And then another option is a contract with task authorization, and that is done for a department or branch that needs to purchase the same thing frequently. So for example, military bases need to test their water very frequently, or DFO needs to test the water in the lakes, like on a monthly basis. So instead of having to go through this whole process, receive quotes, narrow it down, award a contract, it is actually a one-time contract based on a specific task that a price is set for, and then it's just much faster to to procure those services. And it saves a lot of time for buyers. I'm not sure that it, for suppliers, there's still quite a lot of reporting that needs to be done, if I'm being totally honest, but those are some of the most common methods of supply. And an example that I will use is a project management example. So if you are looking for opportunities to bid on within Canada Buys, there are a few things I want you to make sure you're looking out for. Like I said already, some commodities are considered mandatory. So in the professional service example that I used, many professional services are considered mandatory commodities, so they would have to be posted publicly, would have to rather go through a supply arrangement or standing offer. But if you see a number here in a tender document, that tells you that you need to, before responding to this tender, you would have to already be a qualified vendor. So where you see NPP here, that means notice of proposed procurement. So it means that they are kind of letting everyone know that they are looking to purchase something and that it will go through that number, that supply arrangement or standing offer. But it would only be people who are already on, only businesses who are already on the list would be qualified to respond. And see here where it says procurement method and it says competitive - selective tendering. That's kind of a tip. That's just helps you know if you have not already gotten yourself on that pre-qualified list, so you're not part of the supply arrangement or standing offer, then you're not able to respond to this particular tender because this one is only qualified vendors are eligible to respond.
Sarah Ann, we've got about 2 more minutes.
Okay. So again, just a tip because I don't want you to waste your time. If you're not already on the list, it's best to check here before you go too far into the details of the tender notice. If you do want to look further, you can go into bidding details. However, in order to read bidding details for an NPP, you have to register for a different platform, SAP Ariba. So here it says again, this is only open to those who are already qualified vendors. But it also will tell you, oh, maybe this one doesn't, who the qualified vendors are. Sometimes they do share that information, so you're able to see who your competitors are. And that can be handy. It can be handy to know. And I know this can get a little bit confusing. This one in particular was posted by another department, and it's an RFP. So you see RFP, which may make you think, oh, I'm eligible to bid. But again, you want to make sure you're looking where it says procurement method. And again, it says selective tendering. So when you see that, that's a heads up that it's likely going to be limited to a pre-selected pool of vendors. So again, just make sure you're checking that detail before you get too far into, looking through the bidding information and all of that. And sometimes you may actually, if it is going through a supply arrangement, the supply arrangement might actually be open, and you would be able to submit a bid to get yourself on the pre-qualified vendor list. But that's kind of a whole other presentation. But yeah, here again, you see there is an NPP notice within the tender or within the bidding details. And so this one is going to be, yeah, limited to the pre-qualified list of vendors within a supply arrangement.
Well, and if you think of this process as a step-by-step process, maybe your first step is trying to get on the list, and that might take a length of time, but it's a great first step, and then learn more about what's next.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if the product or services is a mandatory commodity, it's really worth considering. If it's not, then please feel free to reach out, and I'll help you set up filters and set subscriptions. And
Great.
then another thing to add, if this is all feeling really overwhelming, another trick is looking to see who has been awarded contracts in the past and reaching out, because maybe they may need a subcontractor, right?
Yes.
So that's a way to build your capacity, build your experience. So you can always reach out to vendors who've been awarded contracts and see whether or not, they would be interested in subcontracting you. All they can say is no, but that's a really nice way to get your foot in the door and build up some experience. And I better cut things off there, and I'll give the floor back to Kathy.
Thanks, Sarah Ann. That's wonderful. And it's one of those things that I think we just have to keep going with. It's sometimes at the beginning you think, oh, this would be great to just kind of do as my business, but we always encourage these sessions as to for a business person to consider an add-on to their existing business. If you could get one or two government contracts in 5 years, what would that make a difference to the profitability and longevity of your business? So yeah, we've had some great comments in the chat saying, man, this is a lot, but man, is it ever interesting and valuable information. So Sarah Ann, hang on. I think you're probably going to get a lot of emails, which thank you very much for being here today and doing this with
Thank
us as
you.
always. I just want to do a little quick blurb about what we offer at WeBC. We offer these great on-demand courses. They're all online. They can teach you about HR, financial fitness, strategic marketing. You work through them at your own pace for 90 days, and they're completely free on our website. So that is a big thing. We've got a couple of our last session here for procurement is a guide to government contracts, how to sell, prepare, and deliver. We hope you join us. That session will be an hour and a half, a bit of a wrap up of what we've talked about in the last two, and lots of opportunities for questions and discussion. So we hope you're there. And there's an AI session, AI Made Simple, if that's possible. And we really hope you join us. They've been very popular sessions. If you've got to go, thank you very much. But if you can take a second to do our feedback poll, we would so appreciate it. And if you have a topic, like Sarah Ann was saying, maybe getting on the list is a whole webinar. So, if you've got information or like you want more information in a certain part of this webinar, please put it on the feedback poll. We would love that. And yeah, thank you very much for being here today. Like I say, if you've got to go, please sign up for our eBlast newsletter. We appreciate you taking the time today on a sunny day in August. And thank you a million times to Sarah Ann. We'll see you again another time. Yeah, thanks everybody. Enjoy your day. All right, Jen, still